History is a fascinating subject, and we need to do it in a way in which children are excited about history. How do we do that? Hi there. In many countries, English, history and art, rather English, social studies and arts go together. They are treated as one block. That is something we should learn to do in India, especially in the primary classes. Today, because the NEP 2020 asks us to be cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary, integrate education, it is possible for us to create these blocks in our teaching and learning processes. It saves time, it integrates subjects, it makes learning more meaningful. This is Usha Pandit, your Mind Springs English teacher. I am starting a new stream where I am also going to talk about history, especially for the primary grades, because the same teacher is doing all the subjects. So there is no reason to do each of these subjects in a separate silo and create more work and less meaning. So, today we are going to talk about certain realities in which we live. So, we are living in the 21st century. So, everything that we do needs to be skills based. We need to show children the how of learning. We need to give them skills. We need to show them how to search for things and make them autonomous and independent. This is our goal. History is a fascinating subject, and we need to do it in a way in which children are excited about history. How do we do that? In the earlier days, we used to have those horrible dates that we had to mug up, and the names of kings and the names of places, which was just a rote method. If you are following the rote method, you need to drop it as soon as possible. If you are reading out of a textbook and explaining history, that is the best way to get children bored and lack motivation. So we need to stop that. So how are we going to teach history? History, first of all, to begin with. So when you look at a grade 5 child, let me start at the top with 5 and not through the smaller classes, but by the 5th standard, the child should have a larger idea of what history is. I don't mean a definition of history, but I am talking about history being the human story, history being our story, and therefore it has to be interesting because it's about us. It's about our past and about our traditions and our customs and the mistakes that we have made in the past. That is what history is about. History is like a human interest story. It's like a movie. It's like gossip. It's like controversies. There is so much masala in history that if we don't tap into those exciting parts of history, then history becomes boring. So, let's look at how we can use history for reflection. Let's look at the first chapter in history, which has to be understanding the big picture of history. So, if I were to talk to students, I would ask them, I would not tell them. Ideally, don't tell children anything, ask them. Ask them what are the categories into which we would put history. So, history is about who? And they will tell you history is about events. History is about all the things that happened. So, you can even start if it's a grade 4, you can even start with personal histories. What is your personal history? You were born in a certain place, a certain time, and you were named, and then you went here and you did that, or you won a prize. That's your personal history. Now, in history, we are therefore looking at world events. We are looking at what happened to human beings across time, large time, spaces, large spaces and large times. So space and time is the big one that we are looking at in history, aren't we? So events, so you put the word events on the board, and then children will be invited to talk to you about how it's about people. So they may not say people, they may say kings. So you can actually say you're absolutely correct. It is about kings, but it's also about common people. It's also about people who were monsters and who killed other people in times of war. So we put them under people. And then what else do we have? We have time, isn't it? So timelines, 100 years ago, 1000 years ago, million years ago. So we've got a timeline running in history that's very important. We've got land. Land was a big one. So people moved and people settled and people fought for land. So they conquered countries. Land is also about belonging to a place. Land is about culture. Land is about language and food and arts and architecture. So there is a richness. So when you put up these big categories, under those you can put up the smaller categories, and I have shared that with you on this board, where you can see under each category very clearly we have certain sets of little things that happen. So for example, under events you will have timeline and events, chronology, what happened first, what happened next. You will have major events, you will have innovations, you will have the big industrial revolution, French revolution, you will have the big periods of time, age of computers, age of the printing press. These were big innovations that changed the way man lived his life. Today, currently, what is happening in our history? We had computers earlier that changed us completely. So we have GPS now and we can travel anywhere. We had computers, and so we didn't need to go to libraries. We had it. We got cell phones. So there were so many. You can get your children to talk about all this. Don't tell them, ask them, and they'll tell you all the wonderful inventions that they were. And finally, you're telling them, what about AI? How will that change our world? And that's a great place to discuss that. So if you put these under, and then you talk about conflicts and wars and revolutions that happened from time to time, that completely changed everything in a country and for the people, that will be also coming under the big events that changed the way things happened. You might talk of change itself as a category, a completely new category, and reforms. So people didn't always live the same way. People protested, women were given certain rights, children were given rights. So there is a lot that is happening there. You can see that this is becoming a nice lesson. Children are now interested. They are looking at the various categories and saying, wow. They are not expected to remember all this. You are not going to give them a test. You are not going to give them an exam. You are just putting down stuff that they are contributing and you are contributing. When you finish these cards on change and religion, you talk about sources. How do we know all this is true? Maybe people made it up. If that were the case, then how do we know something is true? We need evidence. Where is the evidence? The evidence is sitting in sources. So it's sitting in old stones, in letters, in documents, in artifacts. We gather all these and we kind of try to put history, old history, like a jigsaw. We look at interviews of people, plenty of things. These are called sources. Once you put all this, guys, you make them into cards, and children can make their own cards, and then you put them into groups and give them one category each. That history book, that big book that is sitting there, or the syllabus that is sitting there, Each group is supposed to take one card. Let's say your card is change. Go through that book and see where in that history syllabus you are seeing evidence of change, where you're going to learn about change. Where are you going to learn about sources? Where are you going to learn about land, of people, of kings and dictators? Whatever your syllabus, see if you can find evidence. This is a joint discovery. It's not a huge exam, it doesn't have to be perfect. But what has happened at the end of this, maybe 2 periods, 3 periods, is that children have had an overview of that book. They are no longer frightened of it. They have an umbrella view. They know what they are going to do this term, in this year. And that's a great way to introduce history. When they go to the next grade, they know how to do this process, and so it's easy. But this is the starting point where you give them the big ideas that are happening in the syllabus. If you do history this way, start your history this way, you will enjoy it and they will look forward to history classes. That's all for today, but we will do more in the coming days. We will talk about specific lessons and see how we can present it. Thank you.